Hello everyone, you're welcome to my YouTube channel, and in today's video I want to show you how you can create a Spring Boot application. I'll be walking you through a step-by-step guide through all the flow, all the processes, all the code snippet, and I will be implementing this by creating a project, which is basically a school management app. And then just like you can see right here on the slide, for this very project and demo, we will have a database table. We'll be working with an SQL database. We'll have basically three tables: one for student, one for teacher, and the other one for subject. For this tutorial, I will be using the H2 in-memory database for the sake of those viewers who don't have any of the SQL database set up on their system, or if you don't have MySQL or Postgres, then you can feel free to work with the H2 database, in-memory database, which I'll be working with. And then also towards the end of the video, I will try to sync that with a real SQL database, talking about MySQL or Postgres or Oracle. And if you don't have MySQL or Postgres set up on your system, you can feel free to use the Docker version of MySQL or Postgres database, and I will also show you that at the end of the video, how you can connect to your SQL database, be it the one you installed on your system or the one that you will be getting from the Docker, the Docker version. And the technology we'll be using for this tutorial, I'll be using the Spring Boot, which is a framework for creating an API on Java, and then we're not going to be writing the raw query ourselves. So we'll be using Hibernate JPA, which is an ORM for you to write your queries. You don't need to write all the SQL queries of create database, create table, insert table, and all of the raw SQL query. We're just going to be focusing on the business logic ourselves, and will allow the ORM to do so many of the mapping for us. And then, just like I said, I'll be using the H2 database so everybody can follow along and everybody can also sync with me. And then at the end, I will try to connect that to a real database out there, because once you want to deploy your app to production, you're not going to be using the in-memory database. You want to have a secured SQL database where you have your data in there, you persist your data, because the in-memory database, whenever you start to restart your app, whenever you refresh your app, you lose all of your data, and you don't want to have that in a real working and production code snippet out there. But it's just basically some of the setup we're just gonna do, and every of the logic, the query, and all of the flow process remain the same for the in-memory database. That is why I just want to walk through that in this tutorial section and demo. Okay, now I just want to show you a brief overflow and the flow chart of the processes, how it's going to look like. So in every Spring Boot application, you will definitely have some files and some packages. So we're going to be following that flow process, and we'll be having a controller file, and we will have all our, which will be in our controller packages. And now the job of the controller will be to accept the user input, the user data, and then every of the query from the user. We want to separate our concerns, because we don't want the controller file to talk directly to our database. Okay, so we want to follow an MVC approach. So we want to have a controller file whose job is to receive user input, receive users data. You don't want to register a student, or you don't want to register a teacher or a subject. So we have the controller file, which will be doing all of the logic for us, all of the accepting of all of the query, all of the body, all of the all of the requests. And once that will be the main job of the controller file. And then the controller file, they kind of will also be having a DTO data transfer object, so that will determine the kind of data we want to receive or want to transfer from a controller file to other section of the project. And from the controller file, we'll be having a service file. service file does most of the logic. That's where we have most of our business logic. That's where we have most of all of the interaction and all of that. And still the service file will not be interacting directly with our database. We have a repository for that, and now the repository will be extending the JPA repository, which has some of the query we'll be working with, and that is how the flow is going to be. And now the repository will we have direct access to our database. This repository or this file will communicate to our database whenever we want to save some data, whenever we want to get some data, whenever we want to make any update, and that will be the job of the repository. And finally, we have the database, which is where we have all of our record being stored. And now for our service file, we'll be creating an interface and a class for our service file. Now the interface will hold every of our methods, and once we go to the coding section, when we start writing our code, you see how important it is for us to follow this kind of separation of concern, for scalability, for you to maintain your code. This is one of the best approach to work with and to follow, and you see how everything comes to sync together. And even if we want to scale, even if we want to add in more feature, then you just need to do some little work. And we're working with Spring Boot. We'll have components will be very loosely coupled, because some of the beans we'll be creating that will be managed by Spring Boot for us. So many of the dependency injection and some of the abstraction and all of that, and we don't really to worry much about that. And that is one of the benefits of you creating your web application with Spring Boot. You avoid so many unnecessary code writing and dependency injection also, that will be managed for you with the Spring Boot. And also, so talking about relationship between our data, I'll also be walking you through some of the relationship which we'll have, and that is also one of the major focus of this tutorial. And so I want to show you how you can also manage some relationships amongst your data and your table. And now we'll have a student, just like I have here. We'll have like a student A, and it's possible student A is taking many subjects. Okay, so student A can take many subjects, and also a particular subject can be taken by so many students. So I'm just kind of mapping out just one student here. So now between the student and the subject table, we will have a many to many relationship. Now this is what I'm talking about here. Now we can have another student. The student can be student B, and it's possible. Let me get this, and I'll put that right here this way. Let me turn this once again. Anyway, this is what I'm talking about now. I just want to get an array there. Okay, good. Now student A is taking both math, physics and chemistry. Now what we'll be doing, the relationship is going to look this way. We're going to try to replicate a real score right now, and we can have student B taking chemistry as well, and student B can also be taking, and this is what we're talking about. All right, so now we have student A taking multiple subjects, and now multiple subjects, which is one subject is being so many more than one student currently take take the course chemistry. Now that is many to many relationship, all right, between the student and the subject. So we have many to many relationship. So that is for the kind of relationship that exists between student and subject. And now we also have subject and feature. Now for this very tutorial, we'll be having now the relationship between subject and teacher. This will be many to one. Okay, just like you can see right here, we have math and physics. Means this subject is the tutor for this subject is teacher O, and we have chemistry that is taken by teacher P. All right, so now what the many to one relationship actually mean here is we have many subjects being taken by teacher. All right, so now if we are to read it in the reverse order, if we want to check the relationship between teacher and subject, that will be one to many. And if we're coming from the subject side, that is many to one relationship. And I will show you how you can map this on your Spring Boot application, on the Spring Boot project, and how we can also have a visual view of how the data is going to look like and how the relationship also exists. So that is for the relationship part, for our data and for our entity. And now for our folder structure, this is how we'll be having our packages. Okay, we will have our controller, which, as I explained earlier on, will receive all of the input from the request from the client. All right, so this is one of the first file, or one of the first function to interact with, and then from there the DTO actually holds a record of the kind of data we expect to receive from the user. Data transfer object, that is what DTO means. So, and then the kind of data we want to transfer to our services and to our services, which we do the basic business logic. And we also have the entity packet. Now the entity packet will hold our model, all right, and the entity packet will hold how our schema in our database table will look like. And then we'll have the service folder, which will hold our business logic, every interaction. And then lastly, we'll have the repository. This is the file that will interact with our database whenever we want to create, whenever we want to get some record, and that will be handled by the repository. Okay, that is it on the practical on the slide and the demonstration on what we're going to do. Right now we'll go and bootstrap our Spring Boot project, and we'll start implementing all of this logic. Now, for you to create a Spring Boot project, you can actually start that directly on your code editor. By, if you're working with IntelliJ IDEA, you can select a Spring Boot emerging project, and from there you fill all of the instructions. But one of the easiest site where you can have your Spring Boot project, where you can have your starter project, you can go to start.spring.io, and then you fill all of the basic information here, and you add every of the dependencies you want to work with. So for me, my project, I want to use Maven. I want to build a Maven project, and then you select the language as Java, and the next thing you select the Spring Boot version. Now currently we have 3.2.0, which is a snapshot version. We have 3.1.5, we have 3.1.4, and also 2.7.6. Now the stable version currently, as at the time I'm recording this video, is Spring Boot 3.1.4. that is the stable version. Okay, and I would suggest you work with the latest stable version and try not to go with the snapshot version, because that is still being worked upon by the Spring Boot team. So I'll select the current stable version, which is Spring Boot version 3.1.4, and I also need to give my group ID. Now this group ID would be some kind of unique identifier you want to give your project, and for me I'll use my domain name, and that should come in a reversible order. So my domain is soft.com, so I will say I'll give the group ID as com.soft. All right, now we'll give the artifact, and for this I want to call this school management, and then the project will be demo project for Spring Boot school management app. Okay, that is my brief description about the project. And for the package name, I just want to call it com.school management, no space in between. And packaging, I'll select jar, and then Java. Now if you're creating a Spring Boot app of version 3 and above, then you're expected to select your Java version should be of 17 and above. Okay, and you cannot work with version 11 or version 8 for any Spring Boot application. application that is of version 3 and above. So I'll select version 17 because that is the JDK version installed on my machine as well. Okay, now here we need to add every of the dependencies we want to work with in your whenever you're building your project. You have so many dependencies on every repository, and just pick the few you want to work with. And for this tutorial, I want to work with I'm creating a web application, so I need to select one of the first dependency I need to start with is the Spring Web version. So you can search for Spring Web version and you add that dependency, and any dependency you click or you add on, you see that gets added on your list of available dependencies. Okay, now in our classes we'll be having some private fields, so we have to create some getters and setters and some toString method for that, and we have a dependency which is called lombok that will help us to manage this, where we don't need to write all of the code, and this will reduce our code templates, all of the getters and the setters. The lombok dependency package can help us get that. All we just need to do is to put in some annotation, and we'll get all of our getters and setters with just a line, with just a single some couple of annotations, and that will really reduce our code snippet. So for that, let me add the package is called lombok. Okay, and now we also need to add ORM, which is IntelliJ JPA this time around. So we also need to bring that. Just search for Spring Data JPA, and remember, as I said, this is an ORM for SQL database type. Okay, and lastly, one of the dependencies we also need to add is our database. So later on we'll add MySQL database, but for now I want to start with a H2 database first. So let's just add that dependency as well, that is H2. Okay, we're going to be starting with just these 4 dependencies, and as we continue with the project, if we need to add more dependency, we'll get to add that. And you can try to explore your file and see all of the dependencies you're currently working with when you click on this button right here in the middle, or you can hold your control and space. That will show you your project setup structure and some of the dependencies you'll be working with. You can see your SRC file, some of the things you already have inbuilt there, we should be working with. And one of the major and important thing you would like to explore is your pom.xml file. Pom.xml file is your project object model file. This is where you have a record of all of the dependencies, the metadata about your project, your Spring Boot version you're working with, and some of the basic things, some of the metadata and instruction about the file, the packages. You get to see them right in here. Now we have IntelliJ Data JPA. You can see that there we have SATA web, which is also have our H2 database. We also have the lombok, and that is basically what we'll be working with. You can close that, and now hit on the generate button. This will generate the Maven setup for you for your project. Okay, let me go to where this file is. This file is currently in my downloads, and I have a zip file. I'll double click on that so I can unzip my file, and the file is currently unzipped, and I have it right here, Scroll Management app. Now you can go ahead and open this up in your favorite IDE. You can open that in VS Code or IntelliJ IDEA or Eclipse. For me, I'll be working with Eclipse IDE, and you can follow along. You can try to practice this on any of the IDE I did mention of. So I'll drag this and locate my IDE. I have it here, IntelliJ IDEA. Okay, now once you open this up, just give it a couple of seconds depending on your system structure. This will load every of the file and every of the packages and dependencies your app will actually work on. And just like we explore the file on the browser, this is the pom.xml file. You can open that up and see on the basic structure and some of the dependencies your project is made up of. And the most important part, I want to show you where you have all of the files and all of the code. You go to the SRC folder, then under the SRC we have the main, and then under have the Java folder. Now this folder contains every of your file, every of your code snippet, every of your logic will be within this Java folder, and within this where you have your group ID, just like we will have it when we are bootstrapping this project. So that will be contained within your Java folder. And then outside that, we have application resource folder, and under the application resource folder we have this application property. So this is where you put in every of the file, every of the setup you want to have for your project. Right now, take for instance your port, your database connection string, all those variables, and where you want to import and work with that in everywhere within your file, and you can have that in here. Now take for instance, if I want to, by default, the Spring Boot Maven project runs on Apache Tomcat server, which runs on the port 8080. That is the default port your app will run on. Now if you want to change that port and work with any available port, any port of your choice, this is where you can set that up and your project will run on that port. Now take for instance, I want to work on this project, I want to work on port 4506. So I need to do that within my application resource file. I enter the value server the port, and then I give the port 4506. So this is the port I want to work on. Now whenever I start my Spring Boot project, it will not work on the default port 8080 anymore, but it will work on the assigned port right in here on my application property file. You can work with application property, or you can work with application.yaml file, and that will give you the same value or the same. So if you're much more comfortable with working with the YAML file on your application, then you can stick to that. And for now, I'll work with the application property, and towards the end I'll also switch to application.yaml, so you can also get to see the difference, and you can choose whichever one you're much more comfortable with and want to work with. So this is the server I want to work on, and the next thing I need to do right now is to set up the properties for the database I want to work with. And for the database I want to work with, for this project I want to work with the H2 in-memory database. So we need to set up some connection parameters to our H2 database. We need to put in the port we want our database to work on. We also need to put in the name of the database URL we want to work with. We also need to put in our database username who want to connect to the database. We also need to put in our database password, just like the way you have your regular SQL setup and every of those logic on the project. So for that, we're working with the Spring Boot H2 database, and for that we need to put in Spring. If you're on IntelliJ IDEA, just like I am, once you put s dot, you have some kind of IntelliJ, and you can work with. So I want to work with s dot h2 dot console, enable this one right here, and I want to set it to true. Okay, so I will set that to true, and the next thing I need to do is to set in my database URL. I need to set in my database URL, my database connection string, and my database password as well. So the code snippets for that, let me just, all right, good. Now the code snippet for that, for the database URL, I'll call it sp.datasource. I want to get the data source .url, and the data source for URL, since we're working with H2 database, that is jdbc column h2 column mem, that's memory database, and the name of the database we're going to work with is testdb. Okay, and so yeah, basically this is what we want to work with, and For H2 database, if I don't put in the password and the username to my database, then what will happen is Spring Boot will try to work with the default password and username to the database. So the default password and username for this database is SA, and then the password is blank. But I don't want that. So I want to put in the password I want my database to work on, and the username as well. So for that we need to put in and that would be sp dot data source dot username. Okay, and you can check this on the documentation on Spring H2 database as well. And now I want to give my database username of root, and then the next thing is the password. I'll say sp dot data source dot password, and then I want to give the password as 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Okay, that's what I want to call my password and my username. Okay, this is the basic setup we need to have right now for our database and our server. Now all I need to do is to go to the application, and this is the main entry file to our project. This is the Spring Boot management application folder where we have the main method, which is started. All right, now if you want to start this project, I can hit on the button right here, and this will run this project, and you can enable the logbog annotation. So just give it a couple of seconds. The project is compiling, and our project is trying to build, and you can see some couple of information about the application. The Spring Boot version which is selected while we're trying to start this project, and you can see our project is currently started. There's no any break or anywhere on the code, and Tomcat server started on port 4506. You can see it right here. Now if you go to the browser, let me quickly go to the browser and let's see. Go to http localhost 4506, and you can see this white error label because we currently don't have any endpoint or any route to 4506 with the slash. That is why we're getting this 404 error, not found. Okay, and this is currently where our server is started, where our server is currently working on. Now the next line of action we need to work on and implement is to go back to our project right here and create all of the necessary packages, just like we have it here on the board. Okay, so I think the next thing is to have all of these packages created: the controller, the DTO, entity, services, and the repository packages. Okay, now here within you have to make sure you're creating that within this your package. All right, within the com.soft.school management. Okay, be careful not to have that maybe in the resources file or anywhere outside of the upper level, so your application that main is being can load every other being you created, and the project will work fine as well. So now click on that, and new, want to create a package. So want to have a DTO package, and also want to have the controller, and want to have the entity package, and the next package we need to have is the repository package, and we also need to have the services. Let me call it service package, and I think that is basically all of the packages we need and the packages we'll work with. Now the first thing I need to create is the class DTO, which will hold the record of the kind of data we want to transfer, right? The data object we want to transfer, and then we also need to create the entity. So for that, now the most of the code snippets and will actually be kind of very similar. So I want to start with the students first. We'll create the student endpoint where we'll add student, where we'll get all student, and where we'll get a single student. And then from there we'll move to creating the teacher, and then we'll create the subject, and from there we'll continue all through the flow in the process. So let me create the DTO for the student. Now I need to create a class for that. Select Java class and we'll call it students DTO. Okay, now for the student DTO, we will need a private string student's name. We will need a student's name, which will be a string. We will need the student address when you're trying to register students. So we're trying to replicate basic school management applications kind of. And we'll also need the student, what class the student will be in. So I'll call it student. The class the student is currently in. We also need to get the student's age. And so these are basically some of the information we'll actually request from the form whenever they want to register a student. So we need to get the name of the student address, what class the student wants to be registered in, and they also need to get the student age as well. So for now we're not talking about the relationship part yet, and once we have the student created, then we'll come and add the student to the subject and all of that. That's where the relationship part will then come in. So now these variables are all private, and I'll need to get the getters and the setters for all of these variables so I can have access to them because they are private to this class, and we don't need to write all of that with the Lombok package which we added. This one right here will get us all of the getters and the setters. So for us to get all of that, all we need to do is to add this annotation to our class, add data. You can see this is coming from the Lombok, and we get that package, and if you hover on it, you see what this package is all about. So it gives you the getter, the setter, the require, add it to string, and all of this method that we need to manually create. So that package will get that for us, and then we need to get the no-as constructor, because that is not part of the data annotation which we got. All right, so maybe we want to create an instance of this class with no element. There we need to get this constructor as well. Also we need to get the all apps constructor. All right, so I want to create an instance of this class with all of the arguments. Then this annotation will get us that as well, and these are all coming from the Lombok dependency we installed. Okay, now we have our student DTO in place, and the next thing we need to do right now is to create our entity. So this is like the schema for the student in the database, and for that we go to the entity package and we create our class. Now select new class. I will call this student. I would love to call it student entity, and you can call it student if you want to. Just be frequent with the name you use and remember what name you call it. Okay, now I want this to be an entity class, that is, this will represent my schema in the database table, and for that, if I want this to be mapped as a table on my database, I need to add this annotation at entity, and this is coming from the Jakarta persistent. Now when you're trying to bootstrap your project, if you choose a Spring Boot version of version 2 and any of the version below, and you'll be getting your entity annotation will be coming from the Java JPA. If you're working with the latest Spring Boot version, then your entity annotation will be coming from the Jakarta persistence, which is the updated version now. And now I'm trying to make this as an entity on my table, and this will throw me some error warning because every entity needs to have an ID, which is a unique identifier for every of your table. Okay, and let me go ahead and add that, and I want my ID to be a long variable. I'll use private long ID and put a semicolon over there. Now this will still not stop giving this error warning because you need to tell the entity that this variable right here is your ID, okay, because this can be any variable, and you need to let the class knows that this field here is your ID, and for that all you need to do is to add the @ID annotation, and that is also coming from the Jakarta persistency as well. Make sure you get that from Jakarta persistency and not the other one below. Okay, now you can see that stops complaining as well. And now for the ID, we need to this ID we want it to be auto-generated. We're not going to be manually inputting the ID ourselves. So for that, we need to add another couple of annotations, which is add generated value, and then this will let Spring Boot know that this kind of value is auto-generated, and then we can put how the strategy and how you want this value to be generated. And for that, you can add within the bracket, you can add generated type. We can go with auto, so this will be automatically generated. Now if that is what this other annotation actually means, this ID will be automatically generated, and the @ID tells Spring Boot that this is an entity, and this is the primary key for our entity of our schema. All right, now with respect to our DTO right here, these are some of the information we need from the zone on register, and if you can see right here, we don't have the ID in there, so we need practically all of these from the user. I also want to save that, so we can just copy this and go back to the entity class, and let me just paste that in. Okay, so these are some of the these are the records of the student whenever I want to register the student in our table. Now we'll have some private fields available in here, so for that we also need to get all of our annotations for the getters and the setters, just like we have right here on the DTOs as well. I can copy that as well, and let me bring that in right here. I'll paste that, and this will give us all of our constructor, as our data, and all of that. I also need to add another variable, which is the @builder, and that's also coming from Lombok, because I want to build this object at the point where I want to create or save the student record. Our entity is fine in place for the student, DTO is in order. Then the next thing we need to do is to create a repository. All right, this is where we'll have an interface, and we'll extend the JPA repository, which give us a couple of methods that we'll work with in interacting with our database, in saving record, in getting record, and all of that. So I'll go to the repository folder, and we'll create this time around select an interface, and we'll call this student repository, and we'll get that. The next thing we need to do, this is a repository, this is not a POJO, this is not a plain old Java class, so we need to add an annotation. So Spring Boot will manage that to us as a Spring Bean, and we need to add repository, and this class will act as repository. And the next thing we need to extend right there. We need to extend the JPA repository. Okay, now we need to extend this, and this class offers us some couple of methods we want to work with, and we need to pass in some kind of a generic value of the the class or entity one we are working with, and also the primary key. And if you hover on it, you can see this code snippet of how you work with this. So now this wanna, the value we wanna pass in is our entity, which is our student entity. That is the kind of object type we're passing in, and then our primary key is a long value. And that is all the setup you need to have for your repository. And after that, we have a repository in place, we have entity, and we have DTO. Then the next line of action is to create and work on our service file. Okay, and now just like we have it right here on the board, now we're actually going to be having an interface, right, that will contains all of our methods we want to have, and then we'll create a student service class that will implement this interface. And let me show you how you can do that also. Go to the services package, and then we need to create an interface, and that will call that student service. So that is the name of our interface. And now this is where this interface will contain all of our logic and everything we want to have. So first thing is we want to have a method, right? We want to have a method that will return after student entry. I want to call that method create, or let me use register students. And now this method is going to take a payload of type student DTO. That is kind of information or data that will be sent into this method. So that is where our DTO will come in place. DTO, and we'll call that payload. That is the payload of the student we want to register. So that is what this method is going to look like. So we'll have a method that will register student, and this is the return value of this method or function, as you may call it. And this is the kind of payload this method register student is expecting. So any class that is implementing this interface needs to have this method. It needs to register student, and that method within that class must return an object of this type as well. And then so that's one of the methods. And we also need to have we need to create another method that will return a list of all our students, or an array of all our students, as you may call it. So that will be list, and that will return a list of students entity, and that will be get all students. And this method we actually not be taking in any input, because we just want to get all of the students, so we're not passing in any keys or any value on which student we want to get. And lastly, we need to get just the last method, which is, I'll call that get one student. And for that, we need to pass in the student ID, which is of type long. We need to pass long ID. Alright, and we expect this function to return us the student entity. Alright, so we need to put that as student entity. So this is the kind of data we're expecting from this function. From this, we're expecting an array or list of students, and this, whenever the student is being registered, we're also expecting this kind of data as to be returned. Okay, that is our interface, and basically we'll be working with just these three methods within our student service class. And now let's create the class that will implement this interface. For that, within the service package, I need to create another package once again. Go to new package, select package, and then I want to call this implementation, or I'll just call it INPM. And now within this INPM folder, I now need to create a Java class. So I'll call this student service I am here for student service implementation. So this will be my service class, so you need to add that as the service annotation at service, and this will allow Spring to manage this class for us. So this class will act as a Spring component. So this student service class, we wanted to implement this interface. That is where we have every of the method we want to create, we want to have that in there. So our class to extend, I'll call this student service, and now this is throw you some kind of warning or error section, and if you hover on that, this will compel you to implement all the methods that we have right in there. If you select implement method, you can see register student and all of this and that. So need to allow that, and the error is gone for now. Okay, now this service class is where we have all of our business logic. Now this is the class that will work with the repository, all right, and that is where we call on the create, the get, and all of the method. So for that, we need to bring in the student repository interface that we have. So for that, let me create a private variable, private, that is student repository. Student repository, here we have it. Make sure you import that from the right package where your repository file is. Select that, and you can call that student repository. Okay, now this class right here, we're not managing this ourselves. We want Spring Boot to manage that as one of the pins. So for that, one of the ways we can get that, we can use the @AutoWire, and this will auto-wire this being into a class whenever we are working with that, and whenever we need it. So this will get this to us as a Spring bean, and we can do it this way, and or we can use the constructor injection. All right, so we can this injection type is called field injection. All right, and we also have the constructor injection, and that is what I would love to work with. And for that, we can create a constructor where we'll inject this our bean, and that will work also fine. And let me show you how you can do that. Let me comment this. For now, get the constructor injector. Need to have public, and our constructor need to carry the same name as our class. And so now within here we need to, this will be what will be the required variable, and we can go ahead and say this dot student repository equal student repository. Okay, and we can have it this way. This is constructor injector, and this is the same with what we have right here, okay, of where we have the auto-wired, and then where we injected student repository using the field injection. And we can do it this way, but with Lombok, which is the dependency we added that help us reduce some of our boilerplate templates, we can do the constructor injector by removing this, and we just need to add an annotation to our class, and that is require as constructor, this one right here. So we need to have require as constructor, and then we need to make this private final variable too, and that will inject this string bean into our service class. Okay, so that is that, and you can work with any of this option I just showed you right now. You can do the field injection, you can use the constructor, or you can also use the constructor too as well. All you need to do is get the required as constructor using the Lombok dependency which we added. Okay, now from our service class at this point, we can start to interact with our database from here, where we have the register student. We can register students to the student repository. We can get all students from student repository. Let me start from the get first. Now I want to get all the students. All you need to do, you need to just say student repository dot find all, and this will return you a list of all the students within the database. And the next thing is to get a single student by ID. All you need to do is just say student repository dot find by ID. And this one right here, you can see that it's expecting a long type of ID. And now all this intelligence you actually see right here, this is because of the setup we have for a repository, right? Because we pass these, right, as a generic, we'll pass the entity type we're working with, and then the primary key. All right, so now this will enable the JPA repositories we are extending, right, so we know and interact with the kind of data. We will request how database schema looks like, and all of that is why you're having this kind of intelligence. All right, let me go back right there once again and show you. We have find by ID, and you can see this is expecting a long, right? I select that. I need to put in the ID which I'm passing here. All right, now this will still throw you some kind of warning and exception, because if it is find by ID, will return you a kind of a promise, so you need to add it get. All right, and this will get you back the variable. Now we are not handling some of the exception right here on this very tutorial demo. I will do that on the other section of the tutorial series, where we can handle some of the exception where the data is not within the database, where we can kind of send some kind of response and manage errors and exception. But for this, we're gonna assume everything students is in there. We have all of the records, and this get will always return us the student record and the value. So that is for the student get and create. Now let's for students find all and find what. Now for the student register, we need to build the student entity, because we are sending a video of this type, right, which contains just some basic or some of the information we want to record on our database. So we need to do a student type, right, based on this input which is coming from the user's end. So for that, if we go to our class file, and we need to create an object of a student, and then we will build that with respect to the payload data being sent to the database. So let's create an object of student entity, and you can call this new student. This is equal student entity dot builder dot build. Okay, so here we are trying to build our student and student entity. Now within the builder and the build methods, this is where we'll fill in every of these other details our student entity actually require, which are not auto-generated. Here, for instance, the ID is auto-generated, so we need to build that. Next, we need to build the student name, student address, student class, age, and all of that. And I will show you how to build that also within the database. So we need to have the dots. And then we need to have dots. We have double dots right here. So I'm trying to bring this into a new line so we can get to see that needs to have a dot. So we need to have dot student address. You can see some of those intelligence over there. We want to get that from payload dot get student address. Alright, and you can see one of the benefits of you having some kind of static type in building your project. Alright, so we want to set the student class to payload dot get student class, and then the next one gets dot set name. That will also be coming from payload dot get student name, and then lastly we want to get the student age. I think I want to get that from payload dot get student age. And I think that is basically all the field we require for us to register a student. Let me just quickly check that. We'll have the age, class, address, and name, and that is basically all what we have here. All right, now lastly, we've built our new student. At this point, all we need to do is to now save this new student record within our database, and all we need to do is to return student repository. We have the .save method, which comes with JPA repository, which helps us to save the record in database. So we need to use the .save, and we need to pass in the entity. All right, and you can see the IntelliSense popping up right here due to the setup we have within our repository interface file, and we need to pass in this time around a new student. And that is it, guys, for you to register a student, get a student, and get a single student. Now we have, back to my board once again, we have we've accepted let's go now to the controller file. We need to accept this user input, right, and pass it to this interface. And now thus far the part of implemented is just from this, right. These are the parts we currently implemented and work on. Now we need to go back and create the controller file that will receive the user input or the user request, and then pass it to the interface, which is our service. And from there we saw the way we have a class that implemented the service that interacted with our repository, and also our database. So currently, let us create the controller file where we have our route, our HTTP route, and we can also use that to test as well. So now within the controller file, we need to create new, select Java class, and we'll call this student controller. Okay, good. Now this class file right here, we need to add an annotation for this file of a REST controller, so that Spring will know how to work and manage this class right here, and that is how it works. Okay, we need to add this annotation at REST controller. You can see that as it's coming from our Spring Framework web.py. All right, make sure you select that annotation from this package. Select that, and now here we can input in some kind of, we can have as many pins, right, or as many methods, right, within this class file. This is what I'm talking about. We can have one that will register students. We can have a bin that will do that. We can also have a bin that will get all students, and we can also get a bin that will get us a single student. All right, we can have a bin that will do this as well. And now we can, each of these bin, they can have some of their distinct route, and we can also have that right at the top level of that bin method. And if there is any unique or a kind of general part on the URL, then we can add that at the top level here under our request mapping. And now I want to add that. Now this is what I'm trying to talk about. Take for instance, if this is HTTP, that is by default HTTP ports, that is by default, then we'll have maybe API/v1/student and then /register. All right, now let's assume this is the path to register a student, and maybe the path for getting all of the students is API v1 / maybe this is get all students maybe, and then lastly this is API v1, and instead of this, it's just going to pass the ID of the student, maybe 20 or 21. Then if you take a look at all of these URL paths, right, they all have some kind of general pattern, right? Like the API, this is v1, actually not vi, API vi or v1. So then they all have this kind of things being repeated in all of them. So we can kind of reduce that and add that as on the top level, which will be within the request mapping part, and that will handle all of that. So this is how you can do that at request mapping, and then within this request mapping we can put in all of that general parts, or that kind of general variable you see within your classes. And let me correct this to viewer, and if we have this, then we can just have just slash create. This will register a user, and then for the get all, then we can go ahead and remove this, right? And also this we can remove the last one as well. So what will happen is this will take, first of all, take the request mapping variable part, which will be right here, and it will then add the other part which will be adding on each of our beans, and that is how it works. All right, and so for this we'll also be using some constructor injection for some of our beans, and that is we'll be injecting our interface. So for that we also need to get our require ax annotation, which we know will be coming from the lumbar dependency as well. So we can add at require ax constructor. Okay, good. Now at the top level here we can import interface. For that we say private final, that is student interface, student service, and this is our service class. All right, and at this with this we've injected our services, right, just like we have it here, where we pass in the user input and all of that, and the service will carry it on over from there and perform every of the business logic. So within our service we've already created the bean to help us create the student, also to get our student, and all we need to do at this point within our controller bean, within our controller REST controller component, we just need to get their payload and then just pass that to our various bean within our service class. So for that, for the registration, we want that to be a post request, so we'll use the at post mapping, and then this is where we can now pass in our URL string path, just like what we have right here. Okay, so I have the slash register, and this the method will be we have that public, and this method will return a student entity, and then we want to call this method register new student. Okay, I'll advise to give your methods kind of a very descriptive thing. Okay, now for this method we want to accept a student DTO kind of data, and just go ahead and call that payload. All right, and now this payload will actually be coming from the form, right, from the form body, and that is we can get that on the request body, right? So we need to add the at request body annotation that will tell our Spring Boot application where this is coming from, right? This is not coming from the path variable, this is not coming from, this is coming from the request body. For that you need to add the at request body, and you can see this must also come from the Spring framework web as well. Okay, now for that all we want to do, we just want to pass that. We can just create a variable and call that var new student equal, this will now call on a student service, or okay, we'll call this service there, service dot register student. I want to pass in payload because that's the kind of data variable this method actually is waiting for. So while student is, everything is successful, and we can just return new student, and that is all we need to do to register a student on our application. All right, and instead of creating a variable and having all of that, we can just go ahead and reduce our code snippet. Let me remove this and just go ahead and return this directly, and that's all you need to do to register a student on your file and your method. But let me just stick to what I have previously, and I want to return a response entity. So let me just cut that up. I want to return a response entity, which is coming from the Spring framework of type student entity, and for that I want to return a response entity dot OK. All right, and then within the body I want to return my new student, which was newly created, so we can have it that way. All right, so that is for you to register a new student, and that is all of the basic logic we need to do and we need to follow. Okay, I need to put the return keyword right here. I think I'm skipping that, and that was why we're having the error warning up there. So that is for creating a student, and now let us go to the next endpoint, which is to get all student. Now, just like the name specified right there, this is a get request, so we need to use not post mapping this time around, or let's use get mapping. So I'll use at get mapping. Right, make sure that it's also coming from Spring framework, and within this part we can put a part extension, just like you have it for the register. And for this, we want to have a public method that will return a list of students. So we'll have a list of student entity. That's what this student will return, and we want to call this method get all students. Okay, and this method will not take in any field variable, and all what we want to do, let me have a variable once again for all student equal service dot get all student. Okay, now we can just go ahead and return this all students. The A I have it there in uppercase, and also for this I want to return response entity. So let me wrap this within my response entity. Let me cut that up once again, and I have response entity, and within the generic I can have all of these methods right there. So for now I need to return a response entity dot OK. There within the body I can pass my all student variable, which I got from the line above. All right, now lastly let us get a single student with an ID. All right, and I think we'll just be passing just the ID right there, and that's what all that will require. So this is also a get mapping, so we need to add at get mapping, and now within the path, right, for this part will require an ID, and now this student ID will be dynamic. Okay, so we are not just accepting just one static, one fixed ID, and for you to receive a dynamic path or dynamic variable which represent the ID, we need to pass in that variable we are expecting from the user. Within this curly braces I will pass the key, which is what we're expecting, which is ID. And now let's create a method for that. I have public, we want to get a response entity of type student, and I want to call this method get single student. Okay, and we want to get with the body, and I want to get an ID, which is a long, so that's his ID look like. And now this ID we for this request, so that we need a variable from the user. Okay, now this ID, which is this ID is not coming on the request body. this ID is coming on the path variable. All right, so we need to add an annotation of path variable. Okay, and we can put in what we're requesting from the path, that is ID. All right, that is whatever the user is trying to send in from here. That is what we are expecting. That's why I need to put in this ID within your curly braces. Okay, now since the ID and what key we're working with here is actually the same, we can kind of remove or have use bracket and this will work fine, or you can still leave it this way and it still all work the same way. So I can leave it there and go ahead and continue. So for that, I want to get the student equal service dot get one student. That is the method we're working with, and we want to get a student. Okay, we can now return a response entity. Dot okay, but now within the body we want to return the student. I type over there and return the student, which we got, and this is our student entity, not just student. Okay, let me collapse my spaces a little. One that of student entity, and we get that student service just get one, and so let me call this one student, and I have some conflicting variables right there. Oh, the problem was actually the period which I was having right here. I don't need that. Okay, so that is it, my friends, on all of the flow process on your students. And this time around, let me restart my server and test this endpoint on my testing tool. For that, let me refresh that, and that will restart the browser, and I want to work with give me some couple of seconds while the process is reloading. And okay, yeah, so currently the app is fully started, and for the testing I want to work with a testing tool on my VS Code. You can test this with Postman or whatever testing tool you have. You can use Insomnia or whatever you want to use to test, and I'll be using a tool called Thunder Client on my VS Code. It's an extension that comes with VS Code. You can check on my YouTube channel. I'll drop the link below on how to test your API using this testing tool that comes installed, that you can install that as an extension on your VS Code. Now that is called Thunder Client. You can come to extension right here and you search for Thunder Client, and this is the extension right here. So you can use this to test your API. I have that installed already, and I want to use that to test my API. Let me search for Thunder Client, and here I have it. Okay, and I want to create a collection for that, and let me call this school management. Alright, so now I'm within my school management collection. I need to put in all of my parts and then test my API. Let me first of all test the HTTP localhost 4506. Let me copy this so I don't make any mistake. I'll copy that and remove all of these. paste that, and we can test this endpoint first, which is to get all students, and this will return us an empty array because currently we don't have any students yet. Alright, so that is it. We have this status response of okay, right, and an empty array coming back. You might want to manage this, right, if there's no any variable being passed, and you can return a response of 400 maybe, or no response found, or some kind of customized message. And for now we're just going to leave it this way, and subsequently we will manage our errors, handle some kind of exception, and return some kind of message for the user. All right, now let me try to make a post request and then register a new user. So I'll copy my endpoint, I'll paste the URL, and it's not get user, I'll not get a student anymore. This is register, and let me put in register right there. And for now, this is, you need to change the method from get to post, because right here we made that endpoint to be of a post mapping. All right, now let's go to the GTO and take a look at some of the data we need from the user. So we need the student name, address, and all of this. So for that, you go to the body, and it's already selected to JSON right here if you're using this testing tool I'm working with right now. Or if you're on XML or any of them, then you should switch to JSON. If you're on Postman, you also see you also have to select raw and then the Postman version, and then within here, this is where you create the JSON object of the data you want to send to the API. So I'll close my curly braces, and within that I'll put in every of those fields which I will need. I will need the student name. Let me copy all of this first. I'll need the student address, and then I'll need the student class, and lastly I will need the student age. And the student age. Alright, now for the student name, I want to put Dewale Thompson, and then for the student address, 121 Lagos Street, Abuja. And then the student class, student is in basic 4, and then student age, the student is 10. Okay, so this student is 10, and now let's try to make this push request to this API. Now once I send this, we can see that student gets created. Alright, let me create another student once again. Call this Musa Chinedu. This student is in 45 Yola Street, Abuja still. The student is in basic 5, and the student is 12. Okay, so now if I register the student, you see the ID gets automatically updated to true. This is the student name, this is the address, and all of the record there. Now if I come back here to get all of my student record, here to get all of the record, if I initially we got this empty array. Now if I hit down the send, you see we currently have 2 responses within our database. Alright, and now if I try to copy this, and if I want to get a new record of my student, go to Thunder Client once again. I want to get a new record and paste that. Now all I need to do is to pass in the student ID. Let me pass the ID of 2, and if I try to send that, this gets me the second student within our table. Alright, so this is it on the API test, and we were able to create get our student, create student, and we're also able to get a single student with our testing tool. And now I want to show you this record on your browser as well. We're using the in-memory database. Now this setup we have right in here within our application or property file. See it right here. We enable console the truth. You can see your database and your record also on the browser once you go to the URL address, and that will show you all of your record on the database as well. So in the next video we'll create the subject, we'll create the teacher, and we'll also see kind of the relationship mapping between them and how we can also test that with other testing tool, and then we'll document our API and deploy this as well. So see you in the next tutorial. Thank you for sticking around, and bye.